boils and ghouls. You are now tuned in to PVD Horror Podcast. Pleasant screams.
Hey everybody, welcome to PVD Horror. I'm your host, Dave, and I am here to talk all about an upcoming film called Rabbit Trap, which will be hitting theaters on September 12th. And to discuss this film with me, I have writer and director Bryn Chainey here, and we're going to be digging all into this folk horror, psychological acid trip style horror film that's heavy on a sensory experience and just really messes with your mind, starring Dev Patel, Rosie McEwen, and Jade Crute. Hopefully I said that one correctly. But yeah, I'm so excited to dig into this. So Bryn, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I'm excited. I told you just before we started recording, this is my first ever podcast interview. So thank you so much for inviting
First
me
of many. First of many.
I mean, if this is an absolute disaster and I have a horrific experience, it'll be the last ever as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That'd be cool as well. You could give me a horrible time, and then I'll be your first. This will be my first and only podcast ever.
I will try my best, but I don't know if I can succeed at that. We will see.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about you. So, getting to know you a little bit. You seem like a very laid back guy, right? Is that a totally wrong reading? Maybe.
Totally. Yeah. I mean,
how would you describe yourself?
No, I mean, I'm riddled with insecurities and anxieties and fear. I mean, I make genre movies. These are not made by people who are absolutely at peace with the world as it is.
Yeah.
So no, but I aspire to be kind and present and vulnerable. So
I think that's what I was picking up. I think that's what I was picking up because I talk to people for a living. So when I talk to people, I look for qualities like feeling comfortable talking to someone. And as soon as you popped on, you started talking, I was like, this is someone who I feel comfortable talking with. So maybe that was the wrong wordage. And yeah, watching this film, everything you described about insecurities, anxiety ridden totally comes across in this film. Yeah. There's a lot of these themes.
Yeah, it's really it's a movie about the horror of dealing with self-loathing or kind of undiagnosed self-loathing or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, it's very cool that you talk to people for a living. I mean, that's I love talking to people one-on-one, but as soon as there's 2 or 3, 4, it starts to break down completely for me. So,
well, I was going to save this for later, but I'll say it now. So aside from doing this show, I also am a therapist. So literally sitting down, talking to people. And when I watched this film, I was like, holy shit, there's some themes in here that I've literally been talking about with people like on a daily basis and having these conversations over and over and hearing them reflect some of the things that I kind of picked up from the film. So I definitely want to talk about that pretty soon. But
that's actually my dream. Making the movie, I thought I want to make a movie that therapists can recommend to their clients or to use as a shorthand, because it does, really deal with. It does. It's a movie about doing the work,
Yeah.
That therapists.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we can get into it at your pace.
This is your debut film, but you've dabbled with shorts, music videos. What gave you the direction to say like, hey, I want to do this, big picture. I know time and money is always a constraint when you're making your debut film, but like what gave you that, like helped you make that decision to move forward and say, I want to make a full length feature here?
I mean, that's been the goal since I was a teenager. I went to film school straight out of high school. I did it in Australia. And graduated in 2006, and since then that's been the end goal. I love watching movies at the cinema. That's always been and I like the format of movies. I enjoy TV, and I love reading. I love books. But for me, the 90-minute theatrical experience was and is my favorite form of visual storytelling. So
yeah.
that was also the goal. It's just taken me about 20 years to do it. And it's really fucking hard to make a feature film. And especially if I naturally write stories that involve some element of the supernatural or the preternatural or something that's requires some scale, whether it's locations or practical effects. So that's also meant that my career progression has been slow, because the short films I made along the way each required a bigger budget than most short films. So I had to, it was also a long path to seek out funding. I was living in Europe while I made most of my short films, to seek out funding, go through the development process, make it. And, each short took a few years. And so across the 20 years between now and film school, it was constant working towards this. I've had a couple of false starts making features as well. This is my third attempt to make a feature. So it wasn't like I just spontaneously went, "Oh, cool! I'm going to make a feature now. I'm going to call my uncle, who's a producer." You're like, it's if you don't come from a background where you have access to people in the industry. I'm the first artist in my family, and I didn't grow up knowing any filmmakers, and I don't have a nest egg to sit on. Like, I've always had to have day jobs the whole way through my career. So it's just been a slow burn.
Yeah.
And like the movie, frustratingly slow. Most people would walk out at some point. They'd go, "Fuck this, it's too slow," And most people,
if they were watching your life in a story, they would walk out at some point.
Honestly, and actually, it's a real thing. I'm 39 now, and most filmmakers just give up at some point, because if they have to make a living along the way, and then they want a family or something, they're like, "I can't do it anymore." And those of us who are maybe because I don't have kids, and I've managed to keep my life very lightweight. I've managed to persist, but that's a luxury in its own way, or madness or something. But many people just give up because they have to, and it's just really hard.
That's the thing too. Like, there's also this idea that there's supposed to be a specific trajectory that our lives are supposed to take, or there's these like definitive timelines. We're supposed to be hitting benchmarkers along the way, but like, so many of us don't. I'm in the same boat. I'm only a few years older than you, and I don't have kids either, and my life looks a lot different than others my age, maybe. And that's something you have to overcome at some point, is those feelings about that, and deciding, like, is the path I'm on, is that still the path I want to go on, or do I need to take a turn here or something like that? And sticking with something, I think that's really inspiring. Right? Because so many people would fall off that path, like you said, and say, F this, I'm going to go start a family or something like that,
And totally. I've forgotten his name, but there's a therapist. He was on the Script Notes podcast with John August. He's a therapist who works specifically with screenwriters, and he was doing an interview, and he was asked, what is the defining characteristic of filmmakers that see it through, like, quote unquote, make it, like, you get there eventually. And he said it's their capacity to despair.
Yeah.
I thought, well, fuck. Okay, yeah. It's not actually your talent or your capacity for hope or your self-belief, your ambition. It's how much despair can you sit with and not be crushed by it. And that's kind of I think I have a great capacity for despair. And
I think that can be true for most professions or paths, that the path there is challenging because it's not very fruitful, right? Like, it's a lot of small things you have to do in order to build up to that big thing, versus like other careers where maybe there's these not to keep saying benchmarkers, but like these things that are a little bit larger. So with filmmaking, it feels like it's a very long, drawn out path, and there might not be a bunch of huge or large feats along the way. It might be a bunch of small things that eventually build into this big thing. Yeah, and it's a very ill-defined path. You don't really see where you're meant to go. So I think what has always got me through is just the love of actually making a film. Sure. My absolute favorite thing is the moment where it's usually in pre-production, because production is kind of execute everything you've planned and deal with the problems that reality is throwing at you. But in pre-production, when you're working with your creative team and your cast, there's a moment where
your imaginations lock into each other, and you start riffing ideas and you start solving problems, and it feels transcendent. It really feels like a sacred thing is occurring where you're in a flow state. And then I love seeing someone who I'm working with do the best work of their life. Like, for example, the designer on this film, she's called Lucy Red. She's a mad little Cornish witch. She's like 5'0", covered in piercings. She grew up in a kind of a traveler community, and now she's a production designer. And this movie, she said, it is her dream project. It represents so many of her interests and her ideals and ideas about what it means to be a creative, strange woman, and what it means to be a creature of the earth, and to bring in ancient ideas of Britishness with modern one. Anyway, everything about it was suited for her, this production designer. And watching her flourish, and just the joy and the obsession she put into it, that is the fuel that gets me through all the kind of lonely, hard times.
So, not to spoil anything, but later in the film, like when they're in the home and we see some very interesting aesthetics in the home, would that be her work? There's a transformation. Yes, that was her work. That is beautiful. That is
amazing work. I mean,
absolutely.
And they put, without too many spoilers, but the house does transform at some point, and we did it all with real. I can explain a bit of it, but nature begins to reclaim the house. So there is moss and algae and mushrooms and vines, and most of it was all real stuff that we'd sourced from forest and a few things that were built. But it was a very tight shoot, and the production design team had planned everything meticulously so they could go in and over a weekend transform the house like in 2 days. And when they did it, I came in on the morning, and Lucy and I just held hands and walked through every room. I could see all the incredible details, and her and I just ended up standing in the living room, holding each other and crying, because it was just the most beautiful. I was inside the dream. My dream that I'd written, and then her dream to be able to create something that was fully immersive and felt, and so it was just, that's an amazing privilege, and that's
I've had this thing recently where I've been thinking about, I forget what the word is, but there's some people who can't envision their imagination, they don't see the vision of something, right?
I think it's aphantasia.
Yes, exactly. And I've been thinking about how much of a benefit that could be in some ways.
Yeah.
Because if you can't see it in your head, you can't be disappointed when it comes out, right? Because that's the thing I've always struggled with is I get a vision in my head, but then when I try to put it out, let's say I'm drawing or whatever it is, if I draw it and it doesn't look how it looks in my head, I'm very upset, right?
Yeah.
But you had it in your head.
Visionaries. Well, in a way that I don't have full fantasia either. I think it's a very broad spectrum. I have when I see things, I don't fully see things in my mind. I see glimpses, but I visualize things. All of our language is geared towards the visual senses, because that's what, as creatures, we've evolved to prioritize, right? And this movie is very much about. I tried to make a movie that was about living through sound, so what it means to be a sound-driven person. I'm very interested in musicians and sound designers and sound artists, and they just see the world differently. They don't see the world, but they hear the world, and it's a much more intuitive way of doing it. It's less. I almost want to say phallic, vision, as in you don't move through the world penetrating it. You let it come into you, and so. I don't fully see things, really. I hear ideas and I can feel ideas, get a vague sense of it. And then when my team will bring me sketches or, if there's anything visual, I'll go to a location to look at it, feel it out. It's more I'm checking if the feeling clicks into place. It's like a puzzle. Oh, that clicks. And that's my way of finalizing the vision, is checking what feels right, and it's not really not a fully visual sense.
Sure.
Blah, blah, blah.
I love that explanation.
Now we're in a therapy session.
No, I love that explanation because it gives a little sense to, you know, why you went the direction you did with this film. Because like you said, it's very heavy on like audio processing and how people kind of experience the world. And in the beginning, there's that quote where it's we enter the world through our eyes, we enter the world, but the world enters us through our ears. And that was a really impactful, and that's early on in the film, but that was such an impactful statement because it really did start getting me to reflect on that. And, you know, that's such a big theme in this film too, is like how they, you know, the couple is experiencing the world. You know, this is probably a great time for me before we confuse all the watchers and listeners. I'm going to ask you to do this a quick synopsis of the film, and you already told me beforehand that like that's the hardest thing to do, which is why I love this question because it is so challenging and everybody approaches it differently.
Okay, yeah, the elevator pitch version is something I never, I'm rubbish at them, you know. So the movie it's set in 1973. It's about a married couple who are musicians, working with electronic music. And they've just relocated to the Welsh countryside for reasons we don't fully explain, but we sense it's clear that they're in a kind of a crossroads in their relationship. And the husband, who's called Darcy, he's really the assistant of his wife who makes the music, and Darcy goes out into nature to record sounds for her to work with. And then in classic kind of ghost story or cosmic horror tradition, he stumbles upon an ancient sound, or you know, that is not meant to be heard by people. And when he records it, it begins. It's an encounter with the fairy realm. And when I say the fairy realm, I don't mean the kind of Tinkerbell kind of little winged little like children. It's the old Welsh goblin folk who are not seen but heard and felt. And anyway, these forces begin to manipulate the couple and enter their lives. Most made, and without spoiling things, but then there's also a child that shows up who's quite clearly kind of connected to these forces, and the child is very interested in entering their lives and completing the family unit, and in doing so, starts to shake out all the problems that they have.
I think you were going to say infiltrated. I think that's a good word to use. She was looking to infiltrate for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess I should also explain that it's also not a movie that explains itself in such clear terms. It's a movie that's about a couple who are experiencing forces that they don't fully understand, that are beyond rational understanding. And so it's not a movie that tries to rationalize those forces. It's a movie about, if you take it as an encounter with irrational, emotional, supernatural forces, and you let the movie do that to you as well, then I think it's a more pleasurable viewing experience.
Sure. You know, you made reference, and maybe this was before we started recording, but it was about some viewers who maybe this film doesn't connect with, right? And I think that the reason that would happen is
maybe most
if you're looking
so
for
far
a linear experience, if you're looking for a structure that, you know, has a beginning and has an end and everything's explained at some point, this is not going to be the film for you. If you're open to an experience and you're willing to interpret and think, this is a thinking man's film. Like this is for the thinking person. Like this, this is something.
I hope so. Or I mean, I do think that I didn't go out to make a movie that doesn't have a structure and doesn't have something you can follow. I think actually the movie does have a very clear kind of beginning, middle, end. There is an emotional arc. It's just the way we handle exposition is not a balance that has appealed to everyone so far. But I think we tried to make a movie that rewards repeat viewing and rewards conversation about it and reflection. It's like it is really the story of a couple in crisis and about the emotional work that particularly Darcy, the husband, is avoiding. And it's that journey and the way that the natural world, maybe the supernatural world, involves itself in those of us who need the work.
Yeah.
The work, we're back in therapy speak, but when when the work needs to be done and we as rational humans are avoiding it and pushing it away, saying, no, 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 I don't want to inspect my secrets. I don't want to inspect the shadows. Nature will not abandon its children. She will come, in times of crisis, she will, come and grab us by the scruff of the neck and go, come on, let's do the work. And I think that's the role. I think that's the role of folklore and myth in our cultural kind of.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't really thought about that. So as far as from that aspect, with the role that folklore plays in society is sort of recorrecting or
because it's all built on, I mean, you're a therapist, so maybe you can explain it a bit better than me about kind of archetypes and like archetypal figures, whether they're kind of internal or external in our lives. I think myth and folklore deal in that realm, kind of the realm of the unconscious and the realm where it's universal across all times and cultures. These figures that have persevered cultural change. There are some figures that, like the old, like guardian, what are they called? Boundary guardians, and kind of the old witch in the woods and the wizard with the staff and the light. These are figures that have persevered through centuries, and I think it's because they grab at something deeper than specific times and places in our culture. They dig at something that's more fundamental and unconscious. So. I'm beginning to rant. Can you rationalize? Can you help me out here?
Well, I wanted to just point out, so two cool things about this debut film of yours. One, its premiere at Sundance, and two, being under the label Spectravision, which it was founded by Elijah Wood and Daniel Noah, who I've also read are kind of some of the some influential figures for you, along with David Lynch and a number of other individuals, even Dev Patel, you had kind of mentioned as being someone who's influential to you. So I thought that was cool to, fall under a label of names of people that have had influence of you. So, talk to me about that experience of being under that label and being able to premiere at Sundance.
Yeah, sure. I think, people who listen to this podcast will probably know Spectravision from, they're one of the most interesting production companies in America, I think. Particularly in the kind of weird fiction space. They made movies like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, Cooties, The Greasy Strangler, which is bonkers, and
love it.
Love it. And Mandy, second film, which is an absolute masterpiece, and Color Out of Space, and so on. So when I started writing Rabbit Trap, I really set out to write my own favorite movie. I thought, I'm going to write a movie that brings together my core interests or the very core of what it means, of what I like, which is folklore and myth and electronic music, like earthy analog electronic music, and also doing work like having characters that have to process unconscious problems in their lives, and it's vulnerable. So, who is making vulnerable kind of horror movies with heart, horror, quote unquote. And when I saw Mandy, when it had a very limited screening in Sydney, which is where I was living at the time, where I started writing the script, it played for one night in one cinema. So I went there with my ex, who recommended we go, and it just looked like a Nick Cage bonkers kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. That's a night out. And I sat there, and it absolutely floored me in its tapping into dream logic while being an absolute blast and going to some really strange hypnotic places, and not just hypnotic by being slow, but by really there's a moment where a character literally hypnotizes another character, and I fell asleep during that sequence. And I woke up a little bit after. I said, oh, was I asleep? And my ex said, I think you actually had kind of a minor kind of panic sleep. I'm someone when I get really, really nervous and anxious, overwhelmed, I sleep it off. I've been doing that since childhood. And the movie hit something very core in me that sent me to sleep as a survival mechanism. So I had to watch the movie again. Anyway, I thought whoever made that movie, I think they're the people who would get what I'm trying to do. So they were the people I targeted. And I think I told you, as I said earlier in the interview, I didn't have any contacts really in the film industry. I'd made some shorts, but I didn't have an agent, and I didn't really dealt with the professional world of filmmaking. You know, I wasn't in America, so I didn't know people who made movies that played in cinemas. You know, so it took about over a year actually, to get the project to Spectavision. It was through a friend who had done some work with them in Portugal, who introduced me to someone else who works with them sometimes, and we very strategically found the right time for me to slip them a pitch deck of the project. And then I got a text like a few hours later from this friend, screen grabbing what Elijah Wood had written back, saying, "Holy fuck, this project looks amazing. Who is this guy?" And we got on a call a few weeks later, and then they were on board. They said, "We want to read a script."
Well, that's amazing.
And then I fell into a deep depression from the pressure and didn't write the script for months. And then they, as is the way, you know, I spent a couple of years developing the treatment and a pitch, and then it was during the pandemic when they saw the deck and they loved it. And then a few months went by, and I heard again, Spectavision, they want to read the script before Christmas. They've got some time coming up. So then I had to pull myself out of the dark hole, and I wrote the script in a couple of weeks, the first draft, and then sent it to them. And then we're off to the races. And they've just been amazing. I mean, Spectavision they're real ones. Like Elijah and Daniel and Lawrence Ingley, who joined the team while making Rabbit Trap. Mm-hmm. Those guys are real believers in what film can do, that you can make things that have healing qualities. We talked about it a lot, that we wanted to make a movie that was eerie and unsettling and plays with some genre, like some of the fun stuff that horror does, but ultimately to make a movie that makes choices that are about healing. Yeah. And that's what we tried to do. Partly also, I think, some of the reactions have been kind of negative, because the movie doesn't go in the direction you expect, which is usually towards a cathartic explosion of vanquishing the malevolent force, which is usually in a horror movie. Instead, this is a movie that says, no, you need to absorb your shadow. You need to let it in. And
I truly found it the easiest and best way to experience this film was, like, at some point in the film, I kind of just figured out I got to lose my conventional expectations for a horror film. And that changed everything for how I was viewing it, and made me just lose that idea that I should know what's coming next. I was curious. I wanted to know more, but I was just allowing the film to kind of play out and allow it to show me what you wanted to show me, basically. And I left after I finished screening it. I had a lot of questions, but I like that. That's the thing I love when I leave a film and I'm sitting there processing what I just watched and trying to make connections. And, there were certain things I actually did a little digging to see some people's reviews to kind of see how they interpreted certain things. Yeah. And then that's kind of when I realized well, that was an amazing experience for me. That's exactly what I want from a film. I want to leave the film being curious, wanting to hear more about it, wanting to think more about it. At least some films. Some films I'm fine with just leaving it, and it was a good experience. All right, cool. But films like this is kind of for me. So I appreciated that. And one of the things that comes up in this film, which I thought was absolutely bonkers, because I've been doing a lot of I did a deep dive recently on this theme, and I've been talking about it a ton. Shame. And how honestly crazy timing that I watched this film, and that's a heavy theme in the film. And I think that I read an interview that you did, and you said the quote, "Shame dies on exposure." And that was actually super helpful for me to hear you say that, because that is very true.
Truly. I mean, actually, that was a line that is a sentence that Rosie, who plays Daphne in the film.
Yes.
During the rehearsals that her, Dev, and I were doing, we were just reading through the script and just talking through all of it. She came in one morning and said that her therapist had said that to her, because she was in there discussing shame because of the movie. And the therapist had said, shame dies on exposure. And we just sat with that for a while. Yeah, that's a really concise way of putting it. I wrote a 2-hour surreal, esoteric folklore movie to just say something. And she comes in with, shame dies.
4 words.
4 words. Yeah. Like, shit. Because
Right.
if I could say things more succinctly, I wouldn't have to make movies, you know.
Yeah.
But absolutely, and I think shame. I'm really convinced shame is the devil. You know, shame is the source of hatred, and
Yeah.
not exclusively, but man, shame has done a number on us as a society.
You know, it's, we talk a lot in, society about negative thoughts about ourselves, or like you said, self-loathing. Some people are familiar with the idea of like intrusive thoughts, and core beliefs are a thing that like we're teaching kids these days, which like that wasn't something that was ever taught to me when I was younger. And now that I'm able to teach other people, it makes so much sense. And I wish people had taught me that when I was younger, because it would have changed
Absolutely.
my outlook
Yeah.
of things. But even like in movies like Inside Out 2 is a perfect example, because that's all about core beliefs, how you see yourself, and when your actions don't match the way you see yourself and things like that. But shame, it can build these core beliefs about how we see ourselves, right? And how we perceive ourselves through other people, and how we see ourselves in the world. And with our main character, Dev's character, it really influences him in such a way that he feels there's such a wall between them. He can't, there's just this thing that he just can't get over. He can't talk about, right? And it just festers, and it becomes the thing that, much like we talked about that young person that enters their life and infiltrates them, his shame infiltrates their relationship and just creates this monster, right?
It does. Yeah, absolutely. And shame is the monster for sure. I think, in this film, and in a lot of people's lives and relationships, totally. And
I think not enough people give it credit for, like, think about it enough of how much it probably impacts them on a day-to-day basis, the way they see themselves.
It's so internalized in our culture, particularly I think around men. Like, I mean, you said before, as a kid, you wish you'd been taught about core beliefs. I was a kid that was some really bad stuff happening, in my childhood, and I didn't know how to process it. So it resulted in me being at times quite a badly behaved kid, but I'd act out, or other times I'd go into, like, at the time, I look back, I go, I was depressed as a child, but actually I was just kind of scolded for being a mopey kid. Like, oh, why are you mopey? Like, don't be mopey. Get out and play some sport. That's shame. That's actually just shaming someone for having troubles in their lives, it's actually. I don't know how much you've ever talked about the veil that's on this podcast as a horror podcast, but like different cultures talk about, and particularly in Celtic folklore, we talk about the veil. Like, witches will say the veil is thin tonight. You've heard that, like in Macbeth. The veil is the kind of the very thin boundary between the physical world and the unconscious or supernatural or sacred world, or whatever it is on the other side. And my little interpretation while writing this movie, because I was reflecting on that a lot, is that the veil is often, maybe not always, but is shame. That the thing that stops us from looking at the unconscious realm is the shame that we feel about what we might find there, and that what we have to expose in ourselves, or the pain that we're feeling, or the horrors that happen to us, and the effect it's had on us in our lives. Like, there's a lot of people joke about, like, how modern horror is all just thinly veiled metaphors for trauma, which I think is probably the case for almost every fiction piece ever written is actually just a reflection on trauma. But I was less interested in trauma and more interested in the shame and the effect it has on someone over time and in subtle ways. Because at no point does the characters talk about shame in Rabbit Trap. But I'm glad that you picked up on it in the character of Darcy, that he's someone that's living under this blanket of shame, and supernatural forces want him out, want him to shake it out. And the only way to shake it out is to fucking shake. You got to shake the trees, and it doesn't feel good to shake. And that's most of the movie, is shaking the trees so that the shame can come out.
Now, you, like, nature is a big piece of this film, as is sound. And when I was looking through your short films, I know one of your short films, this was kind of, expanded on, right? This film.
Oh yeah, roughly. Yeah, kind of. It was like a jumping off point.
do you have themes of nature in a lot of your work?
Yeah, yeah, I do. Yeah, kind of the. I mean, I'm a nature boy. I prefer being outside. Um, and I wrote this movie while doing a lot of walking in the woods. I was living in the countryside during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so the movie was really written in my head while walking my dog in ancient woodlands. And
Do you listen to music when you walk, or do you
yes.
you do?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah. And the kind of music in the film is the kind of music I listen to.
Do you
So
listen to Animal Collective by any chance?
I did. I religiously when it was back in like the mid the 2000 to 2012 maybe.
Yeah.
Religiously.
That was the first band I thought of when I watched him recording the sounds of nature, because I believe I can't remember which album it is. They had an album where it was like mostly sounds they had recorded out in nature. And I immediately thought of them, and I was like, this is such a cool way to formulate music and experiment with different things.
Yeah, I mean, bring sounds in, like
they're already there. They're there for our usage, right? It's why not bring them in?
Absolutely. And absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, I think nature is across all my shorts, and like I'm still trying to figure out why. But I think it's something to do with reconnecting with a part of us that's been lost. That's kind of, I think, at the core of it is that we've all forgotten that we're actually creatures of nature, and that's part of the big problem. We're destroying the earth because we've forgotten that we're part of it and that we're custodians of it. And I think horror, at least horror that deals with kind of natural forces, not slashers, but supernatural or eco horror, or they're uniquely equipped to remind the rational human modern man that actually no, you're still a creature. You're a creature made of the same stuff that the trees are made of.
Sure. And
you have come from mud and you will go to mud. And I think that's a really comforting or kind of challenging idea to me. It remains terrifying. Yeah.
So that actually kind of leads into my next question, because, something that I've recently started to think about more and more is when I talk to filmmakers, I want to ask them this question. So I want to ask you right now, like, what makes you scared? Like, what are your fear and like, how do you portray that in your work? Like this film, I think you just answered that question slightly with like that idea of nature and but like, is there more to the things that give you fear?
I think there are two. Okay. I always have to kind of stop before I answer a question, because my instinct is always to give you the most kind of personal, like put it all on the table. But I realize this is not a therapy session. This is going to be listened to.
I mean, you can make it whatever you want to make. I also want to be generous. But,
yeah. When I sat down to begin writing this film, I asked myself. I do a lot of journaling. I write either writing by hand or on the computer, but I talk to myself on the computer. Like, okay, so where are you at? What do you want to do? And I'll ask myself questions as if I'm my own therapist. And I ask, okay, well, what are you most afraid of? Because this is the question I thought should be at the core of any horror film. If I make something that's scary to me, it will scare some other people, because I'm not an alien. I'm similar to some people out there. And at the time when I started writing it, I clocked that I was very afraid of having my own family. And I asked myself, why is that? And in the process of writing the movie, it took me further in to realize, well, I'm not actually afraid of having a family. I'm afraid of not being worthy of having a family. Okay, I'm afraid of not being worthy of love. Why do I? This is months and months of like reflecting and writing and digging, peeling back the layers under the fear to find the kind of core fear at it. And eventually I landed on, I feel unworthy of love. And that's because of shame, actually.
Right.
And then writing the film was not a traditional way of writing, in that you come up with a plot and then you figure out the best way to make the plot work. It was, how can I dig into this and express this question as a movie of why do I feel unworthy of love personally, but also keeping it in a way that was potentially relatable to other people, particularly men. who also have maybe had bad things from their childhood that have affected how they view themselves. So I think that's the thing I was most afraid of, is the fear of being unworthy of love. And this is a movie kind of about that.
Or having to face yourself, right? Like sometimes we focus so much on others to avoid just having to look at our own shit.
Oh, totally. I mean, what's that joke? Like men would rather, blah, 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 instead of go to therapy.
Right.
Men would rather move to the countryside, record a supernatural sound, concoct a potentially supernatural child who infiltrates their family, blah, 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 rather than go to therapy.
Yeah.
So.
Obviously this is in this film, we're seeing it demonstrated from the male perspective. And what I've learned is actually that it's pretty universal. I think about this female that I work with who stays in this terrible, terrible relationship that's not giving her anything. And it's like, why? And she eventually came to the conclusion, because I know if that I'm not in that relationship, one day I'm gonna have to look in the mirror and I'm gonna have to see myself. And that was like, damn, like that's I relate. Like we all can relate to that, I think. Like once we're removed of our outside relationships, we have to eventually look at ourselves, and that can be a scary thing to do. And that is the monster, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's also not fixed. I mean, who you are, it will change. You think you've dealt with whatever the problem is at any given time in your heart, and then a couple of years go by, and you realize, oh shit, a new one has taken its place, or it's just evolved. Okay,
right?
Like it's never ending, the work.
Yeah.
It's a really astute observation you made, because you asked the question what I'm afraid of. That since I was a kid, the non-deep thing that I've always been afraid of is mirrors at nighttime. Scared the shit out of me. As a kid, I had to, my mum had to go around the house and cover all the mirrors with towels and clothes and things, and I couldn't even pass by a window at night, and I'm still kind of afraid of mirrors in the dark. I would not go in the bathroom with the light off, which directly links to what you're saying. There's something about seeing yourself maybe in the dark that is horrific, because what if it's not your face looking back, or what if it's the face that you didn't realize you had, or or just a ghoul,
Well, it's an interesting experience. I don't know if you've ever had this, but have you ever looked in a mirror and been for a second been like, is that what I look like? Really? And that's, you can do that in the daylight.
With mirrors that flip horizontally, Yeah.
Sometimes I'll look at myself and kind of feel like almost feel like sometimes I've never seen myself. It's like you look at yourself and you're like, wow, I never really noticed that about myself. And that can happen in the daylight. So imagine what that can look like at night, right? So that's a very scary thing. I have the opposite. I'm afraid of windows at night. And that idea that somebody could be just staring at me and I don't even notice. Yeah, that's scary to me.
Yeah, that is scary. Yeah, it's cool.
I love that the thing here that I love about this film and about this conversation is just the thing that we fear the most is sometimes ourselves, right? And it's not even just that my take is that it's always something internal that we're afraid of. We just project our fears to the outside, But go on. It's not what we are afraid we're capable of. It's what we know we're capable of. We're all capable of good and bad, right? But sometimes we lose sight of that based on these negative thoughts we have about ourselves, right? And we're convinced that we're these certain things, or we can do these certain things that we don't want to do. And we forget that we have the power of growth, we have the power of freedom of choice and things like that. So this film starts to bring in some of those themes. And, I really implore people who are interested in these themes to check this film out. I do think that there is so much value to watching this film on, the basis of just its ability to provide insight to certain things, but also on a experimental level of just what you can do with film. Like that use of sound I thought to be so interesting, and it's something I don't really remember experiencing outside of it took me to a film class where we watched The Conversation with Gene Hackman, and amazing. Audio is so important in that film, right? And then that when I was watching this, I was like, audio is such a huge part of this. Now, let me just ask you this question and about that. Why was it so important to utilize audio along with like some of the themes we're talking about here? Are they intertwined, or is it two separate things that you just felt strongly about utilizing?
Probably both are true. Yeah, so like the way I write, at least the way I wrote this wasn't, it wasn't, it didn't always start with logic. It started with what feels right together, and then me trying to figure that out and figure it out in a narrative way. So it always felt right to do a film about shame and dealing with feelings of shame and self-loathing and sound and nature. These three things felt really necessary, and then the process of writing it was me figuring out how and why that was true. And then the line from the film that you mentioned earlier, I think sums it up pretty well. Is that through your eyes you enter the world, and through your ears the world enters you. And I think that's a really clear and for me a haunting depiction of how shame starts. Is that something is said to you or done to you, you experience something that enters you without your permission. You didn't invite it in, it invites itself in. Sound does that. Sound doesn't require you to look at it. It just creeps in. And I think that for me is the connecting point between shame and sound. And then also, separate to that, this is a film deeply rooted in Celtic folklore. Almost all the details of the supernatural in the film are taken from reports of fairy sightings and encounters that I read into from the 19th century, mostly in Wales. And sound is a uniquely, well, maybe it's not just unique to Wales, but it's so tied into Welsh fairy lore, is that they are musical beings, and they are beings you can hear sometimes and not see them. And it felt that was also kind of what was I looking for? It was a kind of a clue for me that sound was important to this film. Okay, well, the supernatural realm is often linked to sound. Why is that? Because it infiltrates on a deep level that doesn't require your rationality to engage with it. It just goes all the way in. How music goes all the way in, and your body responds, and you don't have to think about the music. It just makes you feel. And I think sound has that power, which is more ancient than language. Yeah, it's not about the language; it's about the sound. So
your first explanation about the connection with shame and the way it's like outside messages that enter us, right? And then they form the beliefs. And that was exactly kind of what I thought the connection was there. And it's cool to hear you kind of talk, expand on that with the folklore piece of it, because that's something that I kind of, wasn't as familiar with. I love folklore, but I can't say I'm like an aficionado of it.
You don't need to be, as in almost not very few. It's a very niche subject, but and also I didn't want to. There's a version of this movie where you have the two main characters. They have a great book collection, and then at some point they pull this book off the shelf, Welsh fairies, and they go, "Oh, fairies! They come into us through sound. What do we do?" Where most horror movies have this moment where the characters discover what's going on and they explain it for the benefit of the audience, and that's the moment in the movies I'm like, "Fuck off!" I fucking hate that moment,
especially when you've already understood everything you just watched. Like that's when I can't stand it the most. I'm like, you really didn't need to info dump on me. I'm not an idiot.
And there are ways to do exposition, and I think every filmmaker is trying to be the most generous they can with the audience. They think, okay, we've not done it enough earlier, so let's be kind and do an info dump.
Yes,
I get they're not doing it because they think the audience is stupid. They're trying to find the balance, and all of us try to find the balance. For me, it was more important that because it's a disorientating, psychedelic, surreal journey for the characters, it should be that for the audience as well. And I was very piecemeal with the exposition, trying to put just enough so that the major turns make sense, at least on repeat viewing. You clock, oh, okay, Darcy does at one point talk about sound being, like when you hear a sound, it now haunts your body forever. You know, you're the house that the sound haunts. Or the child does at times explain about how the fairies get into your house. It's like, there are little hints throughout it that repeat viewing, I think, will show that there is exposition littered throughout.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you know, I know that you got to get going. You have other people to chat with, so I have to be mindful of that. But the one last thing I wanted to say was I thought it was cool. Like I said, after I watched the film, I wanted to see, you know, other people's, you know, theories about some of the things they were seeing. And I saw one person had mentioned that maybe Rose's character had her own things that she was dealing with, and I was like, you know, I was picking up on that, but I didn't put a lot of emphasis on it in my mind. And then I started to think more about that, and I was starting to connect some dots. So I thought it was cool that I was like, as a viewing experience, you're able to kind of like look at that, and I think it's a talking piece too. It's like a great film to be able to chat with people after and kind of see what their thoughts were and where the direction they went. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. But Bryn, thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation. And as your first podcast, I got to ask you, how was the experience?
It was great. I mean, it's amazing coincidence, or just so serendipitous, that you're a therapist as well as a podcast host. You know, so that you're excited about talking about, you know, the kind of psychological themes of the film. I was a bit nervous that I'd come on and you'd be like, so list your 10 favorite kills. You know?
Well, that's going to be your next one. So,
okay. Oh God, let's do that. So, you know, which was fun as well. I would just have to really have a good think about my 10 favorite kills. Because I love horror films. I watch,
and everyone that's listening is like, oh man, I wish he would have asked him those questions, probably. But hopefully they appreciate this conversation.
Anyone who really wants just that kind of topic probably has turned this interview off a long time ago. Like,
yeah, exactly. You're right.
This melancholy Englishman talk about shame. Like, that's not for me today. So, yeah, but no, it's been great. Thank you so much for being so engaged. You know?
Absolutely.
Like really digging into it. That's what I hope people get out of it. And I hope it's actually the movie isn't an absolute downer. I hope it's actually a pleasure.
No, it's rather beautiful. It's interesting, and there's a lot of stuff to decipher and to think about throughout. So it's a very intriguing film, and I do hope people check it out. And I was notified that September 12th this will be hitting theaters. So looking forward to that.
In the US at least, yeah.
Okay, and I would recommend that people check it out in a theater, because I think that's going to be the best viewing experience as far as
the best listening
getting that
experience.
audio. Exactly.
The sound, I mean, we put so much love into the sound as well. I mean, the goal was to make the best sounding, I want to say horror film, because let's just say horror as shorthand, because, you know, but we wanted to make the best sounding horror film ever. You know, I don't know if we achieved that, but I think we got pretty close.
Pretty close. Yeah.
It's pretty psychedelic, the sound design. And immersive.
Absolutely.
So I've listened to it a couple of times in a cinema, like I did the 2 Sundance screenings, and it was so great to hear all that work kind of infiltrating your body and seeing people also, not to spoil it, but like the credits is the way we do sound design in our credits is different to most movies. You know, we don't have a song at the end to break the tension. We have this kind of 7-minute long sound design piece that's meant to be a kind of a meditation. And on the second screening at Sundance, it was so cool to see all the audience clock that. It was a great crowd. And they started to lie back. I looked around. Everyone was lying back and closing their eyes.
Nice.
Oh, shit. I'll do that too. We all just lay back for 7 minutes and just let the sound design wash over us.
That is amazing.
It was such a beautiful way to end a movie experience, rather than like, music hits, everyone gets up, let's go.
Yeah,
let's write a review.
Yeah.
Like, it's a 1 star. Instead it was like, let's lie back and really reflect and just have a feel.
I love that.
For a while. So
that's awesome.
You don't get that at home. So I'm excited for anyone who gets to hear
absolutely
good cinema.
Yes. So, all right, Rabbit Trap, September 12th. Go check it out in theaters, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you for tuning in, and Bryn, thank you for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Game over.